Welcome to Embracing the Bold Radio Hour, where we explore the vibrant arts, entertainment, and design scene right here at Valencia College. Join us as we chat with students, faculty, and artists about their journeys, inspirations, and professional experiences. Each episode unveils the creative pulse of our campus, offering insights into the world of artistry and education. Let's delve into the heart of creativity together right here on Embracing the Bold. We're so glad you joined us today, and I'm your host, Rebekah Lane. Hi, folks. Welcome to Embracing the Bold. Today we have Kaileigh Anne from Central Florida Community Arts here talking to us. This is part of our community series, and what that means is right now this is a pre-recorded interview because our faculty and I are on the holiday break. And so we are not in the office to share with you what we are doing, but this is a great opportunity to really help you get to know the community, the resources, and what it means to be an artist right here in Orlando, Florida. And so we're taking that holiday opportunity to do this. So I'm going to ask for Kaileigh Anne to introduce herself, what her role is at CFCArts, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Rebekah. I'm so excited to be here and get to chat with on air to all your students and listeners. So my name is Kaileigh Anne Tayek. I'm the director of the School of Arts and Health with Central Florida Community Arts, which is one of Orlando's largest arts nonprofits. I've been there for 9+ years, so a little while of a journey. For folks who aren't familiar with Central Florida Community Arts, we really do a whole bunch of different things. We have a massive community choir, 300-piece symphony orchestra, over 2,000 kids involved in our youth theater program, and then what I get to do, which is oversee the School of Arts and Health, which works with folks as young as 6 weeks old, all the way up to folks in end-of-life stages who need dementia and Alzheimer care support. We see about 24,000 people in a 4-county area, so we aren't small. We're big. Love to get you involved with us if that's something you're interested in.
That's awesome. So what is your specific role? What do you do?
Oh, many things. I feel like in the arts, you wear a lot of hats no matter what your title is. But my title is Director of School of Arts and Health, which basically means I oversee everything that we do out in the community that makes that population happier, healthier, and wholer in some way. A lot of times it's the integration of an art form. We use all 5 main disciplines of the arts. And there's that intersection between how can painting lower my stress level? How can singing in a choir and that feeling of connectivity, well, how does having that community actually support me in having better health outcomes? That's what I'm really interested in quantifying and supporting within our community.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, it's neat.
Yeah. So is there a lot of arts and health work happening here in Central Florida?
I would say yes. The thing is people don't generally know it is happening. We're probably one of the biggest, we are one of the biggest nonprofits in the country doing the work at the intersection of arts and health. There are about 4 other big cities, Boston being one of them, Minneapolis being another. Where there are these really great pockets, these intersections of arts organizations working with either clinics or hospitals or local community nonprofits like ourselves to really advance the arts and health field. But it's not widely done across America. It's way more prevalent in Europe, where most of the research started.
Okay, so when you're talking about arts and health, what? Because you've mentioned some examples,
sure.
But so what does that really mean? And I like the way you said this. You talked about working at the intersection of arts and health. So what does it mean to be doing arts and health?
Sure, absolutely. There's lots of different roles here. So knowing that the folks who are listening to this are maybe students or performers, we have this idea that when we get our degree in performance, or for me it was music ed, but at the time I was a jazz performer, I was like, that's going to be my career. I went to Disney. I was like, this is it. Performance is my thing. And over time, it kind of lacked its luster, gig work in life. And then I got married. Now I have kids. What I wanted out of life really changed. And so that's really when I started to find opportunities to partner with community where it wasn't about me performing, it was about finding ways for other folks to perform. So that's what I really mean about the intersection of arts and health. It's where we're taking the art form and seeing that its purpose is bigger than just maybe doing the art alone. There's lots of different lots of different jobs within the field of arts and health. So it can look like, you went to school to direct a choir and you're directing a choir. How would arts and health intersect into that? Would be making sure that someone is overseeing how your choir is enhancing social outcomes within your group. So not just about rehearsing the music, but ensuring that you're creating an atmosphere where the 300 members can connect with one another, that you're thinking about folks with disabilities or accommodations first and foremost. So really having this like lens of how can someone participate in the arts. That's its like simplest form.
So you're looking at outcomes before you even begin.
Yes.
And you're looking at outcomes that that are slightly different, although not necessarily super strange. Like we know that participating in a choir builds community generally,
Sure.
mostly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so what you're saying is just we know it's probably going to generate community, but let's make that an outcome and let's be even more intentional about it.
We would say like, let's be mindful, let's be intentional. If someone is new, how are you creating the process for that person the second that they walk in the door, that they know that they're in a safe space, that they are welcome regardless of what they're bringing in, what their background could be, what they might look like. Like there's a lot of barriers that people might feel to comfortability in new spaces. How are we overcoming those things, getting them equipped, maybe giving them a buddy, helping them navigate to exactly where they need to be? And how is setting them up for maybe that first rehearsal really going to yield that social connection with the folks around them and build community, and therefore we can start to quantify the bigger importance of that interaction.
Okay, great. So it sounds like arts and health, some of the work that you're doing is just being intentional about measuring and acknowledging
the needs of the community in typical, performance art spaces.
The needs of the community, but also looking at like we know that this does this for the most part already naturally through the process. And so how do we just growing that, right?
Yes.
Like making it just more intentional.
Absolutely, yes. And then honestly, the music outcomes come very naturally out of that because you have a very invested group of folks who are so well, interconnected. So when you're talking about let's think about our choir and our symphony, when you have a group of 300 people that enjoy being together, it's a lot easier to get them to move, together.
Right.
So it all benefits one another.
So we just talked a lot about, I glommed on to community through choir. So like what are some other examples? So we've got community building through choir. Great. Wonderful example. What are some other really concrete examples of art and health?
Yeah. So those are, I would say, like the simplest form. It's something that most people who are probably listening to this can go, oh yeah, I had a friend in choir. I know what the experience was like, or theater kids. We're like, oh yeah, I was a theater kid. I totally get that. When we start talking about more tangible things we can do, some of the best examples would be our Musical Minds choir. So that's for folks with Alzheimer's and dementia. And basically that one is based in like a brain health science. So the goal is the folks that have those diseases and their care partners come together and they sing music that would have been prevalent in the teenage and early 20s of the person with that diagnosis. The entire program is based in how in our brain, our memory really stores our memory really stores like emotions and like very in a positive way, like a visceral memory, especially in those formative years, those teens and your 20s, the first times that you're falling in love or you're out on your own. Those things really stay with us, locked away in our minds. So when we are talking to folks with Alzheimer's or dementia, it's an opportunity for us to find a way to connect with something that they're going to be able to remember. So often we pick and we choose songs that are familiar to the participants or important to them in some way. And then with the intention of seeking to unlock those memories, give them those more longer periods of being alert or awake. The coolest part of the Musical Minds program is folks when they're nearing the end of that diagnosis, like with Alzheimer's disease, they may like sleep a lot. They may not seem like they're listening. But next thing you know, you turn on music and they'll hear something that they recognize. And all of a sudden, this person sitting next to you will start talking. And they'll like, I remember this one woman, Ethel, at one of our nursing home sites. And for all intents and purposes, I was just sitting next to her being kind, but she wasn't participating. And she heard New York, New York. And she just kind of looked at me, and then she started talking to me about her father and her family, and, oh, you know that song, like out of nowhere, this whole memory. And then she's telling me how I remind her of her daughter, but her daughter lives elsewhere, just like having this coherent, very real conversation where we were connecting as two people. And while it didn't last forever, it only lasted for maybe like 5-ish minutes. And then, we went about our day. It was a moment of awake. It was a moment of connection. And the arts got her there, which is really cool.
Wow. So Musical Minds, it sounds like it's sure the musical outcomes are important, but the strategy behind it is about music selection. It is about what else? Music selection?
Yeah, so music selection's a big part of it. The environment that we create is a big part of it. So going back to that intentionality, how are the chairs arranged? Who is in the room? Is it a caregiver? Is it a member of a nursing staff when we're working in facilities? Then we have 2 different types of teaching artists is what we would call them. So someone who is playing piano and singing live, and then another person who is walking through the crowd, really activating the crowd, typically also operating a PowerPoint of words. So no one has to be flipping pages. We're not trying to read music in any way at this point. We're just looking at very large font of familiar words to songs that the participants do already know. And then we frequently will survey the participants both in age, so if maybe they can't tell us what their favorite songs are, we can take a general guess for if they're in their 80s, what would have been popular, how I was talking about that sweet spot, the teens to 20s.
Right.
Or sometimes people will be like, these are my favorite songs, or my mom's favorite song. This is her wedding song, or this is the song she danced to. She'll remember dancing to. Like, could we add these to our roster of songs? So it's cool. It's very very person centered, I should say.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
And does this choir perform?
So Musical Minds is not about performance. It's really just about those moments of being. So it is not a performance group. It's meant to be participated in the moment.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So that takes a shift from being in a choir to perform.
Yes.
So that usual objective kind of pushes that aside and goes, okay.
Yeah, now we're using, singing and choir for their own well-being, for their own growth, for their own brain health. Yes.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, so I was like, those are two different ends of the spectrum. There's a lot of work that we do in between. One of our biggest programs that we run is a program called EtB for folks with varying cognitive disabilities. Mm-hmm. I am most proud of that one because I started that one about 6 years ago. My husband now directs it, and we have over 40 students enrolled every semester and 12 students from across the country who do our virtual class. So how EtB works, very similar. So I said how it's kind of like an in-between. EtB is meant to help students build creative skills. So we're using the arts. It's a theater-based program, but they do occasionally also sing. This last show, they rapped and played drums in addition to acting. There is also a virtual class who does a film version. So we do short films that are filmed through Zoom or at our theater on a green screen. And then it's all put together into a final virtual performance. And then we have a youth version, a junior group that mainly is students that are connected with the Down Syndrome Association, but folks that need a little bit more support between the ages of 7 and 12, who they think that have been identified as the arts maybe being a tool to help them build not only creative skills, but also we talk about social skills being so prevalent in the arts. Like, how can we learn how to interact with one another? Emotional regulation is a big piece of that program. So how can I express what I'm feeling well, but also how can I express that in times when it's appropriate to express it? That would be emotional regulation. Like, we can't just always blow up when we're mad. There are times when that's not exactly appropriate. And so how can we use the arts and improv and theater games and scripts to help, give scenarios where those types of behaviors are and are not appropriate? And then a big piece of our adult version of that program is we're trying to support them with life skills, in the sense that most of I would say about 60% of the adults in our program, so when I say adults in this sense, it'd be folks 22 and older, they are employed. So how can we support them in this arts program with the skills to be successful and keep a job and excel at that job? Yeah, so it's like, it's again, so that program actually does perform. They do 2 shows a year and 2 films a year. But then we have all those secondary goals also happening intentionally interspersed in how the program is designed.
That's cool. So the goal is to create a final piece.
Yes, a final piece is always happening. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And they're certainly learning theater and creative skills with that.
Yes.
But then you've got the simultaneous learning objectives with just being alive and functioning.
Yes, absolutely. And being, so we talk about our creative skills in that class being the forerunner. It's the thing it's a thing that's going to be on stage. So it has to be good. But how we get there and how we build that team atmosphere, that classroom atmosphere, that's where all that other magic can happen. That's where we can be working on the social cohesion, them getting connected with each other and building. The biggest one I would say is that emotional regulation. How do we help each other learn how to express our emotions properly, and do so in a way that validates others' emotions as well?
That's great.
It's really cool. It's a really special program.
This is great. So it's I do a lot of I do a lot of projects that are multidisciplinary. And one of the things that we started here at Valencia was an interdisciplinary artist residency. And in researching that and building that, I was reading a lot of what the Kennedy Center has posted about like interdisciplinary artist work. And they have this great, it's a simple explanation, but simple in that it just breaks it down into the basics and it makes it really easy to understand. And they talk about arts integration. And there's one way to do arts integration where the primary outcome is the art. And then, oh, by the way, we happen to be singing about the capitals of the United States.
Yeah.
Hooray. Okay, but we're focused on vocal performance, vocal range, technique, da-da-da. And then another way to look at it is to go, okay, so this is a geography class, but we're going to use the Animaniacs 50 States song to inspire you to be excited. So I don't care how you sing, but I do care that you remember those 50 states,
yes,
and be excited about them. And then you've got this really great sweet spot which is like true arts integration, where you have learning outcomes that are equally weighted for both topics. And that is what it feels like you're talking about, right?
Yes.
So, and it sounds like you've actually got all of the spectrum here. So Musical Minds, we're using that music as a tool, but the real true outcome is connection and alertness and just a couple more moments with your loved one. And then, and if I phrase anything poorly,
no, oh no,
fix me.
I was like, you're good. I would say, yeah, it's the social connectiveness, but then also I want to just add, there are some studies out there about how keeping yourself cognitively active can potentially delay the Alzheimer's from progressing. Like using the skills, I should say. So using those skills, remembering things, keeping yourself cognitively fit can support, you having more time, if that makes sense. So I want to, it's not just about being alert in a moment. It's also saying, well, how does that, having those opportunities to be alert, to be present, how is having more and more of those actually giving you even more life, more opportunity, more connection?
That's
in the
amazing.
Future? Yeah, it's really cool, really beautiful.
Yeah.
And we need more science on it too. I was like, the concept of neuroprotective, like fields of study, specifically to arts and health, is something I'm really interested in. Like, how can we quantify that? How can we do more of the good, right?
Yes.
Do more of it.
Yes. And it sounds like this Upbeat program is one of those, like, we have equal learning outcomes.
Sure. Yes. Yeah.
Where it's that true arts integration.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would say when parents talk about the program specifically, they would say, oh my goodness, my son or daughter did so good on stage. But they would also say, and they're so much clearer when they talk at home. Like their communication skills are significantly better, or their reading skills have really improved. So every season when we're doing these surveys, it's, the parents are always so proud of what's presented on stage.
Right.
But then seeing how they're evaluating, or even the students who are adult students who choose to self-evaluate will say things like, yeah, I really feel more confident in X setting, or I can read faster now, or talk more confidently with less vocal stalls. And so all of those things are, while it might not have been the exact about the show, those are equally important to what, the purpose of the program is.
That's huge.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. And this makes me think about, I'm always interested in accessibility. And I was reading an article, I think it was on architecture, but just this idea of building accessible buildings. And one of the comments, and I cannot tell you who this was or where it is, so as much as I know, I'm making it up. But one of the comments that I remember reading was that, look, renovating a building halfway through, it's expensive, it's a lot of money. Like that retroactive renovation, it's hard. But if you plan for accessibility at the front end, and you just make the assumption that this will be an accessible structure, then keeping that inclusion going is easy and simple to fulfill. And it sounds like that is some of what you're doing here. It's like you start with that accessibility outcome, and you're building it through the process. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another big piece is the folks that work in, specifically like on my side of the field, we're on the more administrative side, we're always looking at what research is coming out. What are the best practices for all the models that we're using? And similarly, we go, okay, we're gonna set the stage. Our roadmap for this program is, here are our goals. Here's what we're seeking to accomplish. But then when something new is brought to us, or a new study comes out where we're like, oh man, this could be really great, we seek to then include that in every season, so that there is not just like this stagnant, okay, well, these are the goals, these are the objectives, come and go as you please. Instead, it's, here are our goals, here are our objectives. Oh my goodness, this new information came out. How can we, what could we tweak within the program so that it grows and helps support the students in growing as well? And I think that's a big piece a big reason why the folks that participate in many of these programs I'm talking about stay with us for years. It's not just like, oh yeah, I did that for one season. Most of the students in Upbeat in particular, I've worked with now for the full 6 years, and the program has just gotten bigger, but the core those core students have stayed and continued to grow. They haven't just, plateaued in skill level. They're doing better and bigger things every season and in life as well.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. Yeah.
So with CFCArts, do you, wait, what was my question? I had some questions and they got usurped by other questions. So what I loved hearing you talking about was that you're following the research.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's really interesting. And I thought it was really great to hear you say earlier that you wish there was more research. Like, it sounds like this is an evolving field.
Oh, 100%.
So what does that mean?
I guess it means that in some instances we're in uncharted territory is what that means. where there's like maybe a framework in place, but the details of exactly how to do something are not there. I would say, so to not necessarily backtrack, but to give like the fuller spectrum of arts and health, there are other practitioners at the table as well, and some within CFCArts. For instance, the creative therapies or the expressive therapies. At CFCArts, we have 2 full-time music therapists.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is awesome. And music therapy is even a step farther than arts and health. So you said it so well, where in arts and health, we're really talking about these like 2 objectives happening. One that's more like maybe educational or like life skill development, quantifying in some way well-being. And then the other one is the creative, whether it's putting it on stage or just using the art form for, personal gain or to create something. Those 2 things are happening together. In the creative therapies, what they're doing is using the art form to actually make concrete change in either the brain or there's mental health outcomes. There's like true, not educational outcomes, more like, so you have a student who has a cognitive disability and they are unable to speak. How can playing music actually teach them and build that skill within them?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so music therapy is like the farthest, creative therapies are, in my brain, is like the most intentional use, more in like the one-on-one setting, although they do some group work as well. Where it's really about using a very specific art form to target a very specific goal within the group or individuals for some type of true gain or wellness objective. And typically they are like true treatment plans, like you would work with a therapist or a doctor. You're going to be in treatment with a music therapist for anywhere from 8, maybe 12 weeks, and then they're going to be assessing you for how far you've come.
Okay.
So that I wanted to share that side as well, because people don't really, I shouldn't say that in a general sense. I think the creative therapies are really underrepresented in some of these conversations. But the incredible amount of like research that is out there for folks with traumatic brain injuries, for Parkinson's disease, for any type, truly any type of cognitive disability, and even folks that need some form of just regular, counseling or talk therapy, utilizing a creative therapist and a specific art form to help you achieve those same objectives or similar objectives to working with like a doctor it's fascinating, it's cool, and for some people it works better than the traditional routes of care.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and I love how you started to get into like careers.
Yes.
Right? So we're talking about creative therapists, and that might be different from an artist who is working in health scenarios.
Right.
So
yes.
what are the definitions of each of those?
Oh my goodness. No, you're good. So what I'm talking about here would be generalized into 3 different fields. One is teaching artistry, and that would be something that's really like your entry-level field. Anyone who's here, at Valencia, in this college that wanted to, I'm a performer, I would like to go out and maybe teach performance to kids. That would be a teaching artist. And that is an entry-level position. We have, like 80 contractors, 80 contracted positions. So, hey,
80?
Yeah, we have many a contractor in the teaching artist field, especially during the summer. So check out our website if you're looking for a summer job, because we're always looking for teaching artists or students that are interested in, using their skill set and working. Typically, teaching artists are with youth or with older adults. And you have the arts and health practitioners. So these are folks that have a little bit more training than your average teaching artist. And I should say there are lots of trainings that are out there. I'm currently getting my master's in arts and medicine out at the University of Florida.
Awesome.
They have all kinds of different certificate programs. If you, same with the National Organization for Arts and Health, if you wanted to get certified in the field. However, there is not like a national certification you need. So you can just work in the field, but know that you will need some training, and hopefully it's coming from wherever you're going. At CFCArts, we have a mandated training, some that's done by our music therapists, Other that is done by our social worker to help train the folks who want to graduate from just TA contracts to the arts and health contracts. And then music therapy is its true own field, and it's a board certified profession. However, I should say a lot of folks that enter the music therapy field have their undergrad in a creative art form. So I don't know if I say creative therapies or just music therapy. I'm talking about creative therapies in the general sense. Typically have an undergrad in a specific arts related field, and then you can always get your master's or master's equivalent, picking up the therapeutic side of the degree, and then you sit down for your board, and then you can practice.
Oh, that's amazing. So like if I know that I want to be a creative therapist, my undergrad focus doesn't necessarily need to be psychology. Well, that I may need to take some extra electives, but it would serve me to do undergraduate training in
your art,
whatever my art form is.
Yeah, I would say a lot of folks that graduate in that field, some people set off the course and they go, I'm going to be a arts therapist from day one when they enter school. And, their trajectory is art and therapy courses.
Yeah.
But a lot of folks that enter the field, including some of the members on our staff, they were like Ashley Lewis, who's one of our board certified music therapists. She is an incredible performer and did performance, did teaching, and then said, you know what, I want to take this a step farther and went back and got the master's and then, finished the rest of the degree in the music therapy. So knowing that those degrees really, you need to have both sides. You can't just be like, oh, I kind of do art. No, you got to be an artist who's also a therapist. You don't just kind of dabble.
Wow.
Yeah, which is very cool because I think that also speaks to it's not just about showing someone how to do the art form. It's about being really sophisticated in the art form already, and then guiding someone in using that art form for their own health outcomes. So yeah, it's really cool.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got 3 careers. We've got teaching artist, which is entry level.
Yes.
And you guys have tons of positions.
Yes, please.
So please apply.
CFCArts.com. AO.
And that's amazing. And so if I wanted to apply for that teaching artist, like what do you need to see on my resume to consider me?
Sure. So I think that question is kind of different depending on like what the exact population we're looking to hire for. So for like the summer in our youth programs, I'm generally looking at resumes where I want to see that a student has been potentially like committed to projects, like someone who's like seen projects through, who has experience in their art form, who will be confident in speaking and commanding a crowd. Because that's a big part of teaching is classroom management and not second guessing yourself, like being very confident in, all right, this is the decision that's being made. We're going to now do this decision. And then if any type of volunteer experience or working with either youth or if the population you're applying for is older adults, if you said, I used to volunteer at a local hospital or I used to volunteer at a nursing home, all of those things I would say would be very important because it speaks to who you're comfortable around, who you'd want to be with. Because part of the first training you'll go through when you work for CFC Arts is we'll talk about social systems and how important it is to build that community and relationships. And as a teacher and facilitator in any of these classroom spaces, you are responsible for building that community for helping the whether it's the educational objectives or the performance objectives take place. And I feel like that's the only piece that sometimes gets missed when you're only, vocal performance or something like that. You don't always think about those leadership skills, those, the education side, the how do you teach what you know how to do so well is the piece that sometimes gets missing in the translation.
Oh, absolutely. And so if I wanted to be a teaching artist, then I should be pursuing my field, first of all. I should be committing to projects. And
Yes.
I should be, I might want to look at, an education elective.
Yeah. Oh, I would absolutely. That's only going to help you, because most. I know that this is terrible to say as a teacher, but it's like those that don't teach. What I would say is, nah, you're always going to be gigging as a performing person. You will always be teaching. You will always be gigging. You'll always be juggling a lot of plates. So the more jack of all trades you can be with those different types of skill sets, the more marketable you're going to be to have a I would say more substantial career in the whole field of arts.
That's great. And that's a great idea to think about. How do you diversify not even your skill set? I mean, it's diversifying your skill set so you can diversify your income, but still stay within your craft.
Absolutely. Because I think something that I'll bring up is, so my like whole background, how I kind of got into this was when I was a small child, when I was young. My grandfather was a professional jazz trumpeter.
That is amazing.
Yeah. Very interesting. So he had 3 different jazz bands, a big band, and a Dixieland band. And when I was little, into teenage, into college, I would tour with him and his band every summer when I was off school. So I'd get in the motorhome with the guys, and we'd go, and sometimes you're playing nursing homes, sometimes you're playing state fairs. Like, you just kind of do whatever the list is, and you're cute, and you get like when I was little, I was cute, and they dressed me up, and he's like, here's your set, these are the songs you're going to come out for. And so these really cool opportunities that I had early on in life, and I really went to college, and I thought, what, I'm not going to do vocal performance, because in my kind of naive 19-year-old mind, I was like, I feel like I've done a lot of that. Like, I feel pretty set in this career, but I also know that I want to be able to teach. So I went into music ed, where obviously I majored in voice and piano. And the goal was, okay, I'm going to get this. I'm going to diversify. And then when I went out in the field, I was like, well, I don't want to be a classroom teacher. I'm going to gig and teach on the side, which is the whole teaching artist field that I started to become aware of in my like early 20s.
Yeah.
So it was very similar. You go into this, you go out in the world, and you're like, I'm going to make it as a gigging musician, or I'm going to make it in X. And you realize pretty quickly, it's not that you can't, it's that it's exhausting. And you don't always really know when your next break is, and you don't ever know when to turn something down. And for me, at least, it just felt really, really stressful. I needed the stability of some type of job that I could support myself with, in addition to having these opportunities. And that's really when I started getting more involved in teaching artistry. And I worked that's when I first found Central Florida Community Arts, and I started first doing their pre-K programming, music programming. And then I just slowly picked up into a lot of the different stuff, including launching Musical Minds. And then I started Upbeat many years later, a program for older adults called Narrators. And then, it just kind of, I should say, it just built from there. And all of that to say that, career paths are not straight. They're not like,
no way.
I'm going to do this one thing and do it forever. Cool. Awesome. I'll talk to you in 2 years. But, I've talked to people about this before, where I look back and I think, it was always going to end up this way. Like, I think back on every person I met, the interactions I had, even just simple, I talked about how performing with my grandfather's band, starting at 4 years old and being in nursing homes, where I sang for people with Alzheimer's and dementia, and brought, saw them light up, had that experience where you're walking through the crowd of wheelchairs and, people loving on a little kid. Like, I remember these things so vividly, and I now fast forward to where I am now, and that, that interaction that I had with Ethel that I shared. And I'm like, of course, this is where I am. Of course, 30 years later, this is where my career was meant to be.
Well, of course. Well, you grew up in environments where you were working with a certain population.
Yeah.
And so that's just familiarity. That's comfort in space. That's understanding of nonverbals.
Sure. Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all of the, I always think it's amazing, like how much where we come from influences where we go.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also just, you don't think about those things as being life, like skill development or education, but they are, how you were just like, you recognize nonverbals. I was like, yeah, I've never, and the best part is like, I now am a parent and my daughter comes to a lot of this work that I do. And one of the favorite things I've said to my husband was, my daughter will never once be uncomfortable around older adults.
Right.
She'll never be in a space with someone with a disability and be like, oh, they're being, they're being socially different. No, because she's grown up around all these different types of communication styles and people, where it is just so second nature to our understanding. And I think that is just one, I think that's really special as a parent.
Right.
And I kind of wonder, I wish more people could have that exposure and understanding. I feel like our world could be a better place if we just all grew up that way. But, that's not really plausible.
No, I know. But part of the work that you're doing is helping bridge that, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
And making that more present.
Yeah, and I think something that we work with all of these performance groups, or these groups that we're referring to, is that not only are we trying to give them an opportunity, but in offering these types of programs and having folks look in on them, folks like I can't say society as a whole, but like locally, every time I get to share about this and someone comes and sees a program, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that person was capable of that. Or I think of Alzheimer's as being something different. Or, oh, someone with dementia, oh, they are incredibly intelligent. Like they're not without cognitive ability, just like maybe 5 o'clock is when they're going to be a little bit more fuzzy, but otherwise they can perform, they can do all these life tasks. They are not to be discounted. And I think that's kind of the power of the arts, because it's something that we can understand when it's displayed, or, the art is on a canvas. We as a society can like understand to some extent, like, oh, that was cool that they did this thing. Whereas if you just met the person, you might, I don't know, not think of that as something that they could do.
That's huge.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk a little more about like your journey, because you came from performing. You grew up on the road, it sounds like,
kind of, yeah.
or supporting your family in gigging.
Yeah, for fun. So the whole story would be on top of the grandfather who was a jazz trumpeter. My mom was a professional figure skater. So
That's
yeah, I know.
Cool.
I was like, just a little right turn there. So she toured with a couple different companies. So that was like before she obviously had kids, but that creative energy, that idea of like, you can be good at your art form at any age and do it. It was just very natural in my house, which is what an opportunity, what a privilege. Let me acknowledge that. And then also like not auditioning. I just was the granddaughter of a band leader who already, had a career. So again, I was like that crazy, awesome opportunities. But so yeah, there was this performance, childhood, the music ed. And then what brought me from Ohio and Pennsylvania down to Florida was, of course, the Walt Disney Company, the thing in our backyard.
Right.
Did the college program. And then I worked in multiple different places, but with Disney Performing Arts, I worked in Disney Creative Entertainment in the music department for a little bit.
And like, what does that mean? Were you working as a jazz singer, or were you behind a computer scheduling people?
No, behind not scheduling. So I interned for that department right out of college, and I was these are real jobs. You know how there's like BMI and ASCAP, so the royalty companies. Mm-hmm. Well, you need to know how many seconds of a song when you walk in downtown, not downtown Disney Springs, and you hear BGM or that background music that's playing, and you're like, that's a good song. Yes, someone's getting paid for that, and someone has quantified how long that song is playing and who is getting the royalty checks. Yeah, and that was my job. Among many other fun things that I got to do, which is also like work with talent and not local, just random fun celebrities as they came in to do maybe some recording work or working on Candlelight. So yeah, just it was a really fun experience. But again, going into like things could have changed. That was many, many years ago. But in a lot of these jobs, like that one was called a TA, which means it's a temporary assignment. Sometimes you know how long you're going to have it, and sometimes you don't. So like that time I had it for, I think, like 9 months. But then after that, you go back to like another job and another job. So you have opportunities to stay with the company. But back to that person who I was at the time, where I'm like, I just really want to find something that I can feel settled in or stable in.
Okay.
And so that was where from Disney to working for a nonprofit, which is funny because you wouldn't be like, nonprofit, that's where it's stable. But I guess I had a really cool opportunity in the sense that I found working for the community and balancing all these other things that I was doing. And then the cool part about growing up in my career with Central Florida Community Arts is that I really got to lead these initiatives because I saw how powerful they were. And then, you know how, here's some good advice is, sometimes you don't have to be asked to do a job. Like sometimes if you can see how you can help with something, you're going to find that because you made that choice, you got yourself a job. Mm-hmm. That's definitely how my career at CFCArts started. I was a teaching artist and I was like, this could be more than this.
Yes.
Let me tell you how. Let me bring you an idea. Now let me develop the idea. Now can you pay me for this idea? Yes? Good. Awesome. Let's keep going with this. And so on and so forth to where I am today. Yeah, that's like it in a nutshell, I think.
That's amazing. So you started as a performer.
Yes.
And then you ended up doing a little bit of corporate behind the scenes arts management.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then you shifted from that into nonprofit work, specifically arts administration.
Yeah. So
and teaching artist, it sounds like.
Teaching, yeah. So I while my title is technically I'm the director of the School of Arts and Health, I still do I shouldn't say a ton, but a fair amount of the facilitation. I do most of our curriculum development. So like what we're bringing out in the community and why. That's the research piece that I'm pretty decent at speaking on. And so really, and then I, of course, amongst a wonderful team of about 6 other individuals, do all of the hiring and coordinating to be able to reach that quantity of 24,000 people every year. It's a cool undertaking, but I should say none of the programs that we developed came from just like we should do this. It's like some of them even came to our door, like Upbeat came to our door when I had a connection with, her name is Heather Barnes, is the executive director of the Down Syndrome Association of Central Florida. And I don't remember why or how we connected, but we sat down and we talked about how could we bring the arts to the DSA? Yeah. And she's like, well, these adults don't really have arts because after they've aged out of the public school system, that's when their art opportunities ended. There's no theater programs in town that are necessarily equipped to manage people with varying cognitive abilities. There are some awesome ones like OCA, or Opportunity Community Ability, has a program called Boots on the Ground. But the programs that do typically exist do require students to have a very specific level of capability. And if you are a student who might have challenges speaking or might have a challenging emotional behavior or social need, your average community theater program is not going to be capable of managing and integrating, the inclusion piece is going to be much harder for them. So there's a very significant chance that they're not going to necessarily want to work with that individual because they can't. They don't have the capacity. And so we recognized that need and slowly it developed. So it's funny how all these little interactions blossom into what is now, many years later, a big program. We're the largest, Upbeat as like a whole is one of the largest programs for people with varying abilities or intellectual and developmental disabilities, IDD, in the country. So I was like, we went from, this is a cool idea 6 years ago to we were nationally recognized in 2020 as an innovative arts program for that demographic.
Wow.
Yeah. So we've had a lot of success. But I think that comes from not like any one person, not Kaileigh Anne going, hey, we should do this for this population because science says so. Instead saying, hey, what is our community saying about where our need is? And then how can we partner with folks of that community and find a way to, again, that intersection, bridge the gap between, oh, here's an art form, here's a population who is maybe lacking access or just needs a more intentional way of receiving that art form, and how can CFC Arts be one branch and maybe a community partner be the other. And that has taken us so far. We have over 120 different partners from across the community. Some of them are service industries, obviously higher ed, higher education like Valencia and UCF. We also work with our major healthcare systems as well, so Evan Health and Orlando Health, and then, of course, our public school systems. We have several programs in OCPS and in Osceola County Public Schools, and in several charter schools in Seminole County as well.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow, you guys have a huge reach.
We do. We have a huge reach. We need teaching artists. Yeah, listeners? CFCarts.com.
Well, and so I love that you made this jump into arts administration. Like, did you have to do training to be able to do that?
No, I wish. I say I wish because I was like, that was one of the reasons, catalyst, that I'm back in grad school, because I realized a lot of my skill set in not necessarily the admin side, but in the sophisticated level that you need to be to make these types of community changing decisions it's a lot of responsibility. So I would say admin side are skills that I feel like individuals can build through just work experience and also a high degree of self-reflectiveness. I think one of the things that made me successful specifically in this field, because it is dealing so much with people, is trying very hard to listen first and, respond versus react, like trying to figure out how to be the best communicator in all these different ways, whether it's managing staff, managing teaching artists, managing students or partners. Those are all different, sometimes even personalities you have to have within your nature to be able to fully connect and get folks what they need. I don't think going to school for that necessarily would have, made me. Perhaps it would have, but I don't think I needed like a higher degree in admin. But then when it comes to the care side, that medical side, that's the degree I'm getting right now is in arts and medicine to make me an even better arts and health practitioner, but also support. I talked about having 80 TAs, half of which are trained in arts and health. How they also need leadership, they need support, and they need someone who's driving. Research is difficult, like, let's be honest, and staying abreast of what's going on in a multitude of fields and in a multitude of different art forms, especially when it's not like one publisher is like, the Journal of Arts and Health on all the disciplines. Oh, perfect. It's not as sophisticated as some other fields. So there is a lot of almost like a puzzle piece where you're trying to investigate a specific thing and finding the best way to incorporate or maybe even in some ways like mandate, hey guy, hey team, this is how I was reading about X. This is how the best way that we're going to move forward with this population or with this situation. A really great example of that is a program that we're adding this year called Body Boundaries. We just got a grant from Disney. We got $10K from Disney. And so one thing we noticed, because we're working with Upbeat, we're working with folks with varying abilities, but who are adults. Like our program, majority of the participants now, because they have grown up with us, that core group is in their late 20s, early 30s, and our oldest members are in their late 40s.
Yeah.
And it's important to note that they are adults with jobs. Some of them strive or are attempting to live independently or live in living group home communities with folks with varying abilities. And many of them are in really serious long-term relationships with other people. They have these full, very normal lives as similar to that of a neurotypical person. And with that, though, comes a challenge, which is understanding when it's appropriate to have, like, okay, we all know it's annoying when people are PDAing, right? Like in public, you're just like, okay, great. I'm psyched. I'm trying to walk down the hall and you're macking on your girlfriend. Fine. But there are times when that is like absolutely not appropriate, where you'd be like, that is actually now a social, like, you know, you wouldn't do that at a funeral. You don't do that in a church. Like there are places and times where that's absolutely not going to fly.
Yeah.
In the middle of rehearsal would also be a time when that is not going to fly, which has happened. And so the question then became, hey, if we're recognizing that this is now a new need of this community as they're aging, as they're getting more mature in their relationships in life, how can we now help them with developing those needs? And so we're partnering with a couple different specialists who have this it's called Body Boundaries, but it's like essentially a training about the different social circles and how it's all okay. You know, like I'm going to say something crazy. Sex is okay, right? Like there are things that are okay, but we don't talk about them all the time. And we don't talk about them in specific places and with specific people. So knowing those boundaries. And then the coolest part about Body Boundaries is the intersection into the drama arts. So how can we, with these same students, use these best practices, work with these types of therapists who are, managing social and bodily changes within specifically this population, then bring in a theater component where we're acting out these scenarios, we're talking about what these different circles look like, and we're giving these students who we already know are achieving so well in a drama program opportunities to explore those things.
Neat.
Yeah, I was like, you're like, oh, that went somewhere I didn't expect. Yeah. So the idea of we recognize this now new need with a population who's been here with us for a long time. We found the funding. We found the practitioners, some that aren't even local, that are in different states. And we're all coming together to develop this drama to like social theory.
Well, it sounds like a really direct application of like the work Augusta Boal developed.
Oh my goodness, yes.
So
absolutely.
theater of the oppressed, in which you participants have the opportunity to role play scenarios.
Absolutely, yes, and how through the role play of those scenarios, we're actually building skills. We're building the ability to to cognitively understand those scenarios. So when they do represent themselves up, in life again, you might be able to say, hey, actually you're crossing this boundary for me. Like I've already had the experience where I've role played it. Now I know how to apply that when it happens later.
Well, and this feels very prescient with, differently prescient, but it's in this world. One of the things that I've been training in is, intimacy choreography. And so much of the intimacy choreography conversation is about consent. It's about boundaries. It's about how consent is consensual. It is consensual and it is contextual and it's revocable. And so just this idea of consent and boundaries, and the fact that, all of this arises because we do not talk about sex. And in both of these scenarios, we have actors who are taught to do what the director tells them to do. They want to be good actors. And perhaps we have players who are not necessarily, or in your scenario, you have people who are not as tuned into what social boundaries might be.
Or people pleasing in general, because, there are adults that have been treated like children, they sometimes still are living at home. So this idea that, an adult, another like piece of the puzzle is not only managing those relationships, but also protecting the students and understanding that like every adult doesn't get to tell you what to do, if that makes sense. Because there's also, like, I was like, if we're going to get into that, there's also reports that are coming out, just ridiculous statistics between women with intellectual and developmental disabilities and like sexual assault that we don't even think about, right? We don't think about it necessarily because those aren't the stories that we hear on the news. And, but recognizing that is can be very prevalent in these communities, and making sure that we've, embraced, the teaching those skills and not being afraid of them. And then also, I think going back to the intersection of arts and health, how are we using our artistic tools? How are we using these things to help folks navigate these really difficult, life scenarios, life choices, and build the skills to be able to better approach them if they ever were to come up in the future. Which is neat.
That's really powerful.
I think so.
Yeah. Well, and we're out of time.
Oh, no.
So I'm really thankful you were here. I've got some rapid fire questions. I'm just going to ask you one.
Okay.
Because we have 30 seconds. But fill in the blank. Creativity is?
Creativity is purpose.
Ooh, and what motivates you the most?
Our community.
That's amazing. Kaileigh Anne, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope that you are having an amazing holiday season out there. And we hope to see you back at Valencia College in the spring. And please join us next time for Embracing the Bold Radio Hour.